Our objectives as we get started with the content are to help you understand how you can build an MTSS process and Aware. You're likely doing some of the components that will be mentioned today. And so hopefully you'll leave with a better picture of how these things can work together and really be a systems level approach. We'll also be learning from another local point of view from a district using Aware for MTSS and what their processes look like. As we go through these topics today, our agenda will look like what is MTSS, making sure we're all on the same page with that definition and providing some resources. How can Aware help with your MTSS processes? Getting a closer look at how Lubbock ISD engages in an MTS process through supports in Aware, and then some information on how to get started. So we want to recognize where you are right now with these steps and what you can do next. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and turn things over to Emily.
All right, we always like to open up and hear from y'all. If you're attending the webinar today, it's probably because you either want to learn more or maybe you want to extend your MTSS processes within Aware. So I'm going to reach out and ask y'all to respond in the chat. Do you currently use Aware to monitor your MTSS processes? You can be A, no, not yet. You can be kind of funny and be B and say, nope, that's why we're here. C, yes, and D, yes, and kind of give us some more ideas of how you use it. So are you A, B, C, D? Any of those fit where your district is right now? So we got some A's. Oh, we got lots of A's. Okay, not yet, not yet.
This is great. Yeah, we're so glad you're here for the conversation because you might notice things that you are doing or processes that you already have in place that you can enhance with your use of Aware. So excited that many of you, this might be the first step on your journey.
I love it. Okay, we saw A's and C's across the board. So A, not yet, or C, we're using forms. I like it. That's a good idea of where to start. So let's just talk about what is MTSS. And we know that that has gone through some changes, and we're going to talk to you about what does that mean now. So when we look at multi-tiered systems of support, it is that overarching framework to where we can identify students in a variety of ways. So it's not just academic intervention anymore. We focus on areas like social emotional needs, absenteeism, academic intervention, and behavior support. So those are just some of the means that we look at those areas of MTSS. We have linked, as you know, after you have seen the webinar today, you'll get a copy of the presentation, and we have an article linked in here that I will show you very quickly. Our Eduphoria staff is writing blogs for us, and so we have a little blog on enhancing your multi-tiered systems of support with Eduphoria tools. So we're giving you a lot of that overarching information in the first page about MTSS, but then through our blog post, we really want to go into what tools do we have? What are those key components, and how does Eduphoria help you with making sure that you set up your MTSS process? So absolutely take a look at that. One of ours in-house made this, and it is amazing. And so we are very excited to share this level of content with you to help deepen your level of knowledge related to MTSS and other topics as well. So I like to talk about who, when, and why as we go through these processes. So again, we're talking about all students. We're identifying groups of students, but we're making sure that all students are being screened and served in the manner of which they need to be. When is this happening? All year long. And when you really start thinking about it, it carries over from year to year, potentially based on that identification. Why are we doing this? We're creating these processes, and not only just for a means of documentation, but it's more importantly, how are we intervening with that student early and identifying some methods that they need for success to help support them. And again, that's what we're hoping to provide you today, is through this process that you're doing digitally, hopefully you identify trends, what's working, what's not working as well, and what works for this group of students. So all of those things you can really identify through building a process in Aware. Okay, so how does Aware help you in this area? So we're going to cover just, again, some broad topics, and then we're going to hear specifically from Lubbock ISD and how they use Aware. The first area is student monitor groups. I feel like I talk about this in almost every webinar, but if you're not fully utilizing monitor groups, you are missing out on a great feature. Oftentimes we talk about this feature as a means of making your own demographic group, making your own customized roster. But in essence, it is making a group of students that you have identified their own group within the system so that you can monitor them over time. So you are flagging groups of students so that you can be able to interpret data, compare over time periods of assessments, and take a deeper dive with these group of students. But it also provides a level of transparency amongst the entire system that these students have been identified as part of a group. The last piece is, if you didn't know this, and we saw a lot of people were using student forms, monitor groups help you to easily mass assign forms to a group of students. So if you've created this group and now you said, we need to build a process and start documenting some pieces around this group, after your monitor group is formed, you already have a huge check off of your to-do list, and now you can start mass assigning a form to these students. And it's done very simplistically since they're already created in the system. As we look at what forms are, they're really anything that you want them to be. That is the beautiful part about our student forms. You can create them from scratch. You can go look again and use other district forms. You can mass assign them. You can keep track of the teachers who are accessing these. And most importantly, of course, from my viewpoint, is that you can pull a form into data analysis. You can also see that glance at the student group that apply to this form, and maybe it is behavior intervention. Are we seeing trends academically with students who have this behavior form signed to them? You can easily view that within the system. Another piece that is probably one of the very best is you're no longer going to the front office and going to that file cabinet and asking for, in my district, it was like the purple folder. So who has the purple folder on our student? You don't have to do that anymore. You can now look at all of this documentation attached to the student profile and be able to see historic data and data that is live now associated with what you're documenting, really down to the date and the time that you are documenting within these forms. And of course, I kind of already alluded to this, the reporting and the data analysis that go hand in hand with these forms is very, very beneficial to not only see who is part of the group, what is the status, but also what data compares to this group. What trends can we start identifying from this group since we have a form established? All right, so we'll hear back from you really quick. We covered 4 things very easily right there. Which piece are you the most excited about? So we talked about monitor groups. We talked about student forms. We talked about historical data being tied to the student profile. And then we talked about that reporting mechanism of being able to align trends academically and see these groups of students with that information aligned. So you tell me, are you A, B, C, or D? Oh, I like all. I like all. That's a great answer. That should have been E, right? All of the above. Okay, I saw D, C, and all. Okay, you like the reporting. All right, just a lot of Ds. My kind of people, you like to go dig through the data and see what all of this could mean. Okay, we did have one. We have one A and B. You put E, I like it. Made your own group, your own answer. Okay, perfect. So several things that you're already excited to look into more. One of the pieces we always try to motivate you to do is from the webinar, if you take one thing and you go back and tell everybody within your district that you learned this one thing and start putting it into place, that's outstanding. You do not have to do all 4 of these. You can pick what mechanism really works best for you and where you want to begin. So with that being said, I'm going to toss it over to Robin and let her start talking about how Lubbock built this process and what they did for MTSS.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. It's nice to join you. Thank you for being here. As was said in my introduction, I'm new in this job, and so I do not have all the answers at all. I just know how, as a district, we have utilized, especially Aware forms, to kind of streamline our processes. And as Emily said earlier, to get rid of those folders, those physical folders, trying to move everything online. And that has helped us a ton in our district. If you want to go to that next slide. This question here, how will we respond when some students do not learn? I mean, that's the pivotal, seminal question of an RTI process, committee, team, however your district looks at that. It's one of Eduphora's critical questions, and it follows, what we want students to know and be able to do. How will we know when they can do that, and what do we do when they don't? So that's what I delve into a lot in my district. LISD Aware form, the Aware forms in LISD, Lubbock ISD, have helped us as a district document, of course, interventions and accommodations, especially, and information on students, but also communicate that with all of those who have a need to know anything about that child. Teachers, administrators, counselors, SST leaders, and SST is our acronym for Student Support Team in our district. So it's just a user-friendly way to warehouse information on students. If you want to go to that next slide. So our process, I'm just going to walk through a little bit. We start with an initial referral. So a teacher is concerned about a student because they are exhibiting tier 3, either academically or behaviorally, some tier 3 behaviors, or both. So we have a form that we have created. We have created all our own forms, and I have shared those to the community in the community. So you can see those when you have an opportunity. But we have teachers complete what we call the teacher report form. And this is it's not lengthy. In fact, we have worked very hard to make our process more streamlined and less cumbersome for teachers through the years. But it does capture quite a bit of information that will then be used for what we call a student support team meeting after that document is completed. And that teacher report form, teachers respond to areas of concern, current data, strategies that they've already tried, the strengths and weaknesses of the student, and that's academic and behavioral, and then documentation of any parent contacts. And when that is complete, they let the SST leader know, and the SST leader sets up a meeting, an SST meeting. And that's just like your regular RTI meetings with teachers, parents, guardians, administrators, where as a committee, we look at all those data pieces and we talk about what's best for that student. Then ideally later in the process, like sometimes we set a time, 6 weeks later, after the next district assessment, we're going to meet again as a committee, and we have what we call page 2 of that teacher report form. And that is just some follow-up information, because we want information from the teacher to help guide that conversation. We're going to have another meeting. So we want to know from the teacher and this is, they write this in narrative form. What is the current progress of the student? Talk about the current data. What are the current strategies beneficial to the student's progress? Talk about that. Do there need to be any changes or additions made to current strategies? If so, list below. So that's just more information that we can take to a follow-up meeting to determine next steps for a student. Then we have student needs to upload. We have a link to upload interventions and accommodations. So all of that is warehoused. So it allows the SST leader to verify receipt that that if a teacher looks at the accommodations, then that verifies receipt. It also, though, makes sure that accommodations are at our fingertips. As teachers, as me as the administrator, when I was the principal, excuse me, it was just very helpful to know I could just look on Aware. I didn't have to go anywhere else to see what accommodations we had put into place. So just as a warehouse for convenience. And then we have other forms we've created as well, just to be used as needed. We have a behavior intervention plan, which I have shared as well. We have a safety plan. And we have some other documents that you'll be able to see as well that help guide our work. If you want to move to the next slide. As was said in my introduction, in my past life, I was a principal, elementary principal for several years. And as a principal, I utilized the forms, maybe not like a teacher exactly. In some ways it was similar, or SST leader, but it helped me to support the SST leader. Sometimes the SST leader would come in and say they weren't getting teacher reports submitted in a timely manner. I was able to go in, look, and have a conversation with that teacher. It also helped me to verify that teachers had reviewed student accommodations, which is a critical piece to the whole process. Our district, Lubbock ISD, is a very mobile district. I was on a campus with 30% plus mobility every year. So, and a lot of our kids moved between schools in our district. And I loved the fact that if that was the case, if I saw when a student enrolled that they were SST, I could quickly get onto Aware and I could see their teacher reports from their other school, as well as their accommodations and their intervention plan, so that we could just hit the ground running to meet the needs of that student. So no time was lost on especially our in-district mobile kids. And then as a principal, it just allowed me to support student needs. This maybe doesn't happen where you were, but where I was, sometimes the students spent about a half day or a whole day with me or in the office area. And so it allowed me to know what accommodations they need so that I could set them up for success when they were with me. And also if I was providing support in a classroom, I knew how to support specific students. So it's just a great way to stay pretty nimble and be able to give kids what they need in a timely manner. If you want to move to the next slide. These are the forms that we have created in Lubbock ISD. I've talked about the teacher report forms, the intervention plan and accommodations link. We have one for prior written notice of refusal to evaluate under IDEA. We have the BIP. We have a safety plan. We have consent to disclose confidential information and a consent for additional screening or assessment. Do you mind going to the next slide? I think just the bottom line is that these forms serve as a communication tool to provide relevant, timely information on students so that everybody is aware of what they need to be successful. Processes in our district for forms is we review them every year. I get together, like in the summertime, I got together with the 504 coordinator because we want our forms to be similar. And we reviewed the forms. We made some revisions to the teacher report form because of a new district curriculum for RLA, some intervention pieces that had changed in our district. So we do, those are living documents. We do change them as needed. I will say we also house our House Bill 4545 parent conference information in Aware. which isn't part of SST, but it's just something that has been very helpful and allowed us to document that requirement, as well as any retention conferences that we have with parents. Those are just some ways that we have utilized Aware. And forms, we create forms as we need to. We created the safety plan this year when our safety and security officer said, hey, we need to have kids who have had a threat assessment or suicide assessment. We need to have that information in Aware so everybody, you know, who needs to know does know how to assist that student. So we add as we need to, and we revise as well. Okay. And so just to kind of reflect a little bit, you know, how is your MTSS process similar to ours? A, B, and C, you see there. A, we don't use forms, but are anxious to start. B, we use some forms, but don't yet have a process for district-wide use. And C, we have several Aware student forms that guide our MTSS process.
Okay, if y'all want to give us some responses. All right, I see some A's and some B's. Now we kind of figured we knew we had some new people that were learning. I love it, but Robin provided a lot of ideas. I love the safety and security idea for students and being able to attach that. That is not something I would have readily thought of, but that is very smart. An easy way to capture that information and it be exposed to everybody. Lots of needs and continued needs over the years. So for the most part, y'all were A's and y'all were B's. We are so thankful that Robin was here with us today and talked about that. She mentioned that her forms are all within the Aware community. So you can go look in our forms community and grab some of those. They're all under a section that I'll show you exactly what it looks like in just a little bit. So if you want to go look at those forms, we love the capability in Aware that you don't have to recreate them. You get to go import her form and say, we're going to tweak some of the fields because they do not meet our district needs. And we're going to move forward with this process. And it is simplistic and takes very little time for your district to adapt and start utilizing. So that aligns perfectly with our very next topic of how do you get started? Where do you begin this journey? Because she talked you through a lot of different elements. We start here, but we have groups that revisit these concepts. We revise the documents every year. We adjust them. They are living documents. And so how do you begin this process? So I've given you kind of some ideas to think through. Sometimes we just dig ourselves in and we start building a form, and maybe that's not where we need to begin. Maybe we need to evaluate and audit our current processes. What is happening now? Do we have a folder? Do we have a piece of paper? Do we have notes? What does our system look like right now? Even if it is a bit diluted, if you have systems in place, which most places do, let's start gathering those and seeing how every campus operates and handles these different practices. After we've collected that, why don't we start gathering what those documentations look like and cross-comparing them? What are similarities within our documentation process? What are differences? And how do we want to align these moving forward? And that leads you to the very next step of get your group to consensus. What do we all agree on? What do we like? What are our non-negotiables? What are our negotiables? So all coming to a place where you agree on those things is huge, because then you're ready to start creating. So again, we're not digging into those forms yet until we've had those first three pieces. And now we're moving into the create, and we're starting to dig in there and say, let's create something that will be part of our process. And then let's begin. Let's start that documentation process and see how it works and see what elements we need to tweak along the way. To kind of speak to some of those pieces, I'm going to break down some of the things that are good questions that we've asked in my prior district. It was, I served in the same district as Robin, and so I was one of the people who sat with prior MTSS coordinators and got all of this documentation started. So these are some of the things that we sent around and asked. Do we have a process? What are critical pieces of information that we need to monitor? How are we planning to use this data? That's very important. That will lead you down the path of writing the exact components of a form. Who needs access to create and edit? Have we looked at other district processes? Like we said, we don't have to recreate the wheel. Let's look at what other districts are doing and let's think through it. Because again, the picture to the right is that Eduphoria community. And we have a folder specifically that says MTSS RTI that you can go look for all of these forms and start reviewing them and see if any of them meet your process. As we talk about assigning a form, this is another piece that you wouldn't think assigning a form to a student would be a large deal, but you may want to stop and think, do we want to manually have a teacher add a form to a student? I think in one of Robin's examples, if we do see that a student could be a threat or a security student that we want to document, that may be something we do on an individual level. We would not want to mass assign that form to a student and identify them as a threat risk when that would needed to be decided locally within multiple people involved with that student. And so that would probably be a form we would manually assign one at a time. So who has access to assign that form within your district and within your campus? So again, do we want to have a new form and upload the students within a file? Because we already know who they are. Maybe they are a certain population of students that's recorded within our SIS. And so we want to upload the student ID and assign the form. You can absolutely do that. Maybe you want to replace an existing form that you had. She mentioned that sometimes you change your processes or you change documentation. You can automatically replace a form and assign it to students as well. Do you want to choose from that monitor group that you've already created somewhere and go ahead and assign a form as well? So again, just things to consider. What does it look like? Do we want the form to be there? Do we want it to be added after we've identified something? What should this look like? As we talk about reporting student data, there are some really good questions here to think through as well. A lot of times people will get in and say, okay, we've added our forms. We have our groups, we're looking at data, but now we really want to go back through and look at very specific data pieces. And so it would be really important to kind of decide what times a year do we look at these data components? Because it wouldn't be every single day within a school year. There's probably major points in time that you want to do a deep dive into your data analysis. Robin said, after the next district assessment, we go and we document this. That is perfect. That's a time frame of when you want to start looking at data. And just like we do with curriculum, you kind of want to start with the end in mind. So let's reverse what we want the end result to be and put in time periods that we can monitor that data over the year. And that also helps you when you start looking at, are we finding that these processes are working? Your data is going to tell you that. We're able to draw conclusions and interpret this data and put action pieces in place. If you're able to do that, then check, your processes are working for you. If you're not able to draw conclusions from your data, then let's go back. What are we missing? We could be missing a major piece within our form that we need to know about in order to move forward. All right, beginning of the year processes. This is really important for, hey, you have new students. We've been documenting on them for the past few years. Make sure that you go in and look at those individual students and see what documentation is already assigned to them. The archiving process you can choose to utilize, then the teacher can go back and see all historical data. But you also get to choose, am I keeping a form live? Is this form not one that we want to archive? We want this process to be continuous from year to year, and so we don't necessarily archive this form. So you can probably think of several examples of where that might be the case. If it was, again, safety and security, that may be live. We don't ever archive that form because we want that to be front and center. But if it is an intervention academically, we probably want to archive that form because we're going to start new interventions this year. There are some critical pieces that you can look at too, as far as saving or marking as updated. These seem very simple buttons, but saving and making an addition to a form does just that. It saves the data that you typed in a form and it's available. Whereas when you mark a form updated, it emails the teachers that can see the student, and it lets them know something has been added to the form and you may need to go look at it. So if there is a time period we gave that district assessment, you may go in, make sure the new district assessment data is there, mark it as updated as an indicator for those teachers to go in and start documenting that academic behavior that they've seen related to that assessment.